So we understand that Kyrgyzstan, as a small country, is not responsible for a large part of the greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change. But we do know that there are significant impacts of climate change on the situation of Kyrgyzstan. And we see that, for example, through water shortages, through extreme weather events such as mudslides and landslides that affect the population quite seriously, even with the loss of life, and of course huge economic losses such as the loss of income and so on. And I think when we talk about climate change and what we can do about it, it's important to keep in mind that there's climate change adaptation, which means that we adjust to and better cope with the impacts of climate change, and mitigation, which means that we reduce, we take action to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases. And so one of the things that we have just started work with the government of Kyrgyz Republic on, which I think is going to be really critical for coping with climate change, is the National Adaptation Plan. And that looks at, across the different economic sectors and the social sectors, what adjustments are necessary to better accommodate the negative impact of climate change. And that could be, for example, water conservation measures and integrated water resources management. It is also how to adjust to climate change in the health sector. It is about strengthening agricultural practices in general, and so on. So this cuts across a whole group of the economy and social sectors, as I mentioned. In the area of mitigation, it's really about focusing on when the economy of Kyrgyzstan grows, that doesn't have further negative impact in terms of emissions. That, as we heard the Climate Finance Center head just tell us, is the importance of a low carbon development. That we really embark on a green development path so that businesses themselves have the right incentives to invest in renewable energy sources and in more green production processes. And that's going to help keep the emissions in Kyrgyzstan at a low level internationally. And by doing that, by committing to do that, Kyrgyzstan is going to make a really important contribution to the international and global community along with other countries.
To tackle climate change, we will help the country to step up its climate change diplomacy and to gain a strong presence at the COP. The Conference of the Parties, as we call it COP26 for short. It's going to take place in Glasgow in late 2021. This is, as Mr. Abdrahmanov has already referred, it's a conference that takes place every year under the Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is this key body of international instruments to regulate intergovernmental cooperation on addressing climate change, and under which this historic Paris Agreement was shaped. Just a few days ago, there was a Climate Ambition Summit in the lead up to this, and they brought together leaders beginning to make their commitments, and we call it the sprint to Glasgow, because now member states are expected to significantly step up their ambition in order to declare very specific commitments to the international community in November next year. And actually the COVID-19 outbreak delayed climate talks by a whole year, but it cannot further delay climate action, and that's why the sense of urgency now, of course. We heard last Saturday how the UN Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, he affirmed that the climate emergency is fully upon us and we have no time to waste. And he said that the answer to our existential crisis is swift, decisive, scaled up action and solidarity among nations. End quote. The solidarity refers to the importance of all countries working together and making firm commitments that they can keep, which together add up so that global warming is going to stay below 1.5 degrees and reaching this goal by 2050. And so clearly, with many countries working together, you can see the importance of climate diplomacy. Some developed countries have pledged very ambitious goals, or even climate neutrality. And that means, of course, a formidable transition of their economic and productive systems. For countries like Kyrgyzstan, the aim is perhaps more around committing to a green development track in its efforts to further grow its economy and to shift away from obsolete energy sources such as fossil fuels that generate a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions that are so harmful to our climate. But Kyrgyzstan has a fortunate situation in being a relatively low emitter, and that builds on also the building on if Kyrgyzstan can build on the tremendous technological advancement and the cost reduction for renewable energy that has taken place in the last few years, it's actually possible to build its economy on clean energy sources and more energy and resource efficient practices. It involves also climate smart agriculture and more responsible consumption and production. And I very much welcome the ambassador's pledge to reduce our consumption of things that are coming that require long distance transport or that is packaged in a lot of plastic. This environmental consciousness does have a real impact on economy and climate. And UNDP, we have a global climate promise initiative launched by our administrator, under which we are helping 100 countries globally to accelerate and to increase their commitment to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And as Mr. Abdurrahman referred, this is about setting more ambitious, nationally determined contribution targets for how to achieve this. And right now, together with key state institutions and experts across the country, we're collecting data to help develop these options and inform the goal setting. And this is going to be one of the most important actions to make Kyrgyzstan eligible for international climate financing that can accelerate structural transformation towards a more green economy. And that could make Kyrgyzstan a leader in Paris Agreement implementation. So, confirmation of the country's climate commitment, including at the very highest level, is essential for promotion of the country's interest on the international platform as well, and that will underpin these successful negotiations for the country. And why is that important? Well, it's because some of these investments will be capital intensive and it will require new economic infrastructure that is associated with lowering emissions and transforming this economy. And So the climate diplomacy, we will be offering training and support for policymakers, diplomats and negotiators in the Central Asian countries to bring climate change to the foreground in public policy and in foreign policy. And that's going to include how to integrate climate change priorities into foreign policy. And with these, enhancing negotiation skills will also contribute to achieve better results. And now, so I think this will be a variety of activities to strengthen communication and diplomacy. But in addition, as Ambassador already referred, we're going to support young people and civil society to play a very active part in this. Young people have a lot of ideas, and of course it's also about their future. So what we need is to make sure that these innovative ideas and solutions can be brought to bear and heard, and therefore we hope to empower youth to take action and enhance participation of young people in all these decision-making processes, and that will include awareness raising and information. So let me end by again thanking, of course, the UK for this commitment. Thank you very much for that. In fact, if we don't tackle climate change now, it's going to UNDP Human Development Report.
Будут ли исследоваться в рамках указанного проекта? Можно?